Hello everybody, here we are today talking about the fact that Toronto Maple Leafs have hired their next head coach, that being Craig Berube. Now before we get into that, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or hockey, whatever the case may be. That being said, let's get on into it. So I would like to start off and say I would have put out a video over this yesterday. However, where I live, the region ended up losing Wi-Fi for like 24 hours and it's a relatively rural area. So there was just no way to get videos out. It was not working. I tried and it didn't happen. So anyway, in that time, the Leafs ended up finding a replacement for their head coach that they fired recently, that being Sheldon Keefe. Now, Sheldon was the head coach for Toronto for 5 seasons, and they were a pretty good regular season team, but unfortunately weren't able to find postseason success, only advancing to the second round on one occasion. So instead of going and having him come back for another year, they go out and get who else but Craig Berube. Now, Berube coached as recently as this season for an NHL team, that being the St. Louis Blues. Kind of a weird situation where they had been pretty good and were never terrible when he was there, but he had one of the hotter seats in the league entering the season, as the Blues were a long-time contender, or at least a good team that was going to make the playoffs. You're going to see how things played out. He ends up getting fired about 28 games into the season, but one thing that sticks out on his resume is the fact that he was the head coach of the 2019 St. Louis team that won the Stanley Cup. Now, am I going to go out there and say this is the sole reason he ended up getting this job? No. But I do think that it was a huge reason why they ended up getting him, and it certainly didn't hurt his odds of becoming the next head coach for Toronto. And I would say that this probably is something that is a positive for the fans, as you kind of appeased them a little bit by going out and getting a head coach that used to be able to get to the Stanley Cup final and win it. And I'm not saying this is going to translate necessarily to them winning a championship, but the Leafs have the longest current drought in terms of winning the Cup, as they have not won since 1967. So you can kind of see a correlation. Hey, this guy got a team there, maybe he'll get us there. I know it's a little bit of a stretch, and I don't want to make it as simple as that, but there are other names that they could have gone out and hired, and then maybe fans would have said, why did we leave a former Cup-winning coach off of this list as becoming the head coach? So kind of one of those middle grounds where we'll see how things play out. Now let's take a look at Berube's time in St. Louis, as he spent part of 6 seasons with the Blues, and they made it to the playoffs on 4 of those occasions. They ended up going to the second round on 2 of those occasions, and like we've already talked about, went all the way back in 2019. There were some playoff duds, but they were a really good team, and 1 point actually won a division title and were the second best team in the league during the start of the whole bubble era, as they had 94 points in a shortened year. The Bruins ended up having 100 at that time. Still a very good team, but in recent years, the past 2 seasons, he ended up seeing a regression. They didn't make the playoffs, not this season, but the season prior, where he was the full head coach for the 82 games. And then this year, they let him go after 28 games, as they had 13 wins at that point. Now, I am going to defend Berube a little bit here, as this team ended up losing some pieces right about the time they won the Stanley Cup, or shortly after. You see Pietrangelo go to Vegas, and just some other things that end up happening. They go out and try to keep this team competitive, but in some cases, I don't even think the players are necessarily on par with the guys that they ended up losing. They might even be downgrades in some cases, as they try to figure out what exactly to do, as you are like any team in the salary cap era, saying, how do we keep our guys? And if we aren't able to keep them, how are we going to be able to remain competitive? Looking at some other guys too, like Vladimir Tarasenko, he dealt with a lot of shoulder injuries and was not that guy from like 2014, 2015. And I just see kind of why some things ended up going off the rails, as injuries and losing these pieces were hard to try to make this team a cup caliber side. Jordan Binnington was really hot in the 2019 playoffs at points, and has been kind of inconsistently, or consistently inconsistent, I should say. His emotions run rampant, as you never know if he's going to be in a good mood or a bad mood. Is he going to get ejected? Is he going to end up, going off on the media? All of those things were going on as this team went from being pretty good to being all right. But while we can defend head coach, we also have to look at the fact that they were in charge of this team during this run, and their defensive numbers were not very good in recent years. And again, we will talk about losing those pieces, but you have to find a way to become at least an average team in some regards defensively, as it helps you win games. We know that they have the potential to have some offense to be a playoff team, and they're not exactly truly out of it right now. They're in a very, very weird spot. But yeah, a lot of things going on, and I will say switching over to his time in Toronto, as he is in a new era as a head coach, I don't exactly see the Leafs going and falling off in the near future, as I do feel like they should be a consistent playoff team. They've been able to get there a lot in recent years, and bringing in a coach that saw success with a former team, I don't imagine there's just going to be a drop-off to where they're a lottery side in 2 years. But the question isn't whether or not Toronto is able to get to the playoffs, it's how can he improve this team to make them see postseason success? Are they going to be able to rally together as a unit? As we've seen at times during this Leafs era, that there's been a little bit of a rift with players. Saw it again in the playoffs this year, and we know that sometimes in bad moments, especially when you're on TV, things look a lot worse than they are, but that's something that you have to figure out. Are they going to be able to fix the PK? That was kind of an issue for them in the regular season as well as during the playoffs. Are they going to be able to, again, find that way to move on in the playoffs? I would say the biggest question now is what exactly are they going to do with Mitch Marner, and is he going to be able to have a talk with Brad Treliving to mold this roster into what he wants? I know a lot of people will talk about how the blue line looks a little bit different, but we've talked about during the course of the regular season as well how the forward core looks a little bit uglier, if you will. You're bringing in guys like Bertuzzi and Domi that will be able to contribute offensively, but they're not afraid to drop the gloves and get a little bit dirty. Is Marner going to be that guy? Probably not, but you have to find a way to make him a little bit more sandpaper-ish, if you will, in the playoffs. And I hate to say that, but it's not even just about dropping the gloves. It's about going to the boards, putting in all that effort, maybe taking a big hit that is going to stink, or just batting a guy as you're trying to win the puck back and then get the puck to be able to stay in your offensive zone. I don't really know, but that is certainly a way to go. Now, on the flip side, if you see Berube go out and say, no, Marner's not going to work, we have to spend this money a little bit differently, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but that is going to be one of the bigger decisions that he and Treliving make during the summer as they try to mold this team, again, into what they want to be, because they don't want to be a team that makes it to the second round and say, oh, we're happy this was a good year. It really ultimately is about making it to the Stanley Cup final and winning it, and that is really what Berube's job is about at the moment, as we're seeing that it's a reported 4-year deal, and I kind of have a feeling that in the next 2 years, we'll get a good idea of whether or not he's going to see the rest of that contract. But hey, that's just my opinion. What is yours? And another interesting thing I wanted to talk about is, are they going to continue to have Samsonov or Wall go out there and be the true starter, if you will, or go 1A, 1B? These are all decisions that Berube's going to have to go out and decide for himself. But I am hoping that this team is able to see more success underneath him and see if a coaching change actually does anything for them. Will he be the team, or will he be the coach that ends up taking him to the promised land? Let me know that down below in the comments. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe. Have a great night, and you go love hockey, alright? Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.